as you love, you will see me in the stars. As you look up at the stars, I will be there.
I'm Monica Charette, and this is Holding the Light.
As long as you love, I will whisper in your ear. Little whispers you will hear. As long as you love.
It has been aptly said that when a parent dies, you lose your past, and when a child dies, you lose your future. But when a sibling dies, you lose the past and the future. Holly MacKenzie lost her big sister and only sibling, Kelly, to suicide 20 years ago. In a very personal exchange, she and Colby connect about losing their best friends in life at a very young age. It's an enlightening conversation for grieving siblings, as only they can understand. Holly speaks about the stigma surrounding her sister's passing, how her family coped with the unspeakable loss, and what led her to find peace in her healing journey. Today, we are honored to hold the light with Holly MacKenzie. So hello, Holly. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so pleased to have Holly MacKenzie with us today to share her grief story that began 20 years ago after the sudden passing of her sister and her only sibling, Kelly. This show is so important because I think in the sea of grief after child loss, siblings are often the forgotten grievers, and the loss of a brother or sister includes losing part of your history and your formative years. As Colby has always said to me, Cassidy was the only person who intimately shared his childhood memories. So we'll be sure to give you two an opportunity to reflect on that. But first, I want us to hop right in and give you the opportunity to tell us, Holly, about Kelly, who she was and what your relationship was like.
Yeah, so my sister it's funny, we were very opposite people. And, as I get to be an adult and look back on her, she thrived in the arts. I was the athlete and she was the arts. And so she was extremely talented in piano and vocals, and she loved Broadway. And she always will be older than me too. Here I am at 37 years old and I'm still the little sibling. And she just had this matureness always about her. When we drove the 1 mile to high school, the 1 year we overlapped, freshman and senior year, we listened to Barbara Streisand like tapes in CDs in the car, back when you had to have like the Discman car kit kind of thing. And so in my mind, again, she always was just this old soul. And I think that that's part of her story too, though, because, she had dinner parties at 18 years old. That was like her fun, with having friends over to have a dinner party. But as a result, too, like those things aren't really cool when you're in high school. And so we had, as I mentioned, we had 1 year that overlapped. She's 3 years older than me. So my freshman year was her senior year. And that was when she stopped playing soccer, because I was a freshman that year. And looking back on it now, I'm sure it was because she didn't want to be compared to her younger sibling. I sang in the chorus, really didn't want to because she was this like amazing, I think she was even accompanying the choir or the chorus that year. So when she got done high school, she graduated, she decided that the path for her was to do Up with People. And I don't know if anyone remembers Up with People, but
Oh, we remember them.
traveling, community service performance group. And Kelly had the mindset that she was getting out of Oakland, Maine. It wasn't a great fit for her. And so she was headed out to see the world. And so she started traveling with Up with People in January of 2000. And she spent a few months in Colorado. She toured coast to coast of the United States, Mexico, and Japan. And so this was the year 2000. This was pre-internet of any major capacity. I think there was AOL chat was about what you did. It was all dial up. There was no real email to speak of. There were no smartphones for sure. And she did have this really cool thing that you could write an email, but you literally had to hold it up against a landline phone and it made like the dial up sounds to it, which is really interesting. And so it was like once a week we would get an email from her. And I tell that piece of the story because when she got done traveling with Up With People in December of 2000, all of a sudden she had found her people. They were people that were like her. She had found her community and her group and her tribe, and now they were across the world. And it wasn't like now where you can FaceTime with someone and you can hop on social and see what everyone is doing and you feel like you're together when you're not. There was no Zooms and Google Meets that you could just chat. And she really struggled with being alone. And she decided to go to the University of Maine in Orono. And she started as a January student. And having been through college, Colby is a Colby student, the first years in January don't quite get the same welcoming that you do in September when you start in as a second semester freshman. And so again, she just kind of started and no one really made a fanfare about her being there because it was the middle of the year. So that spring semester was really tough for her in 2001. And I think she struggled with some depression then. Wasn't really something we talked about a lot in our family though. We just kind of knew she was going through a rough patch, but there was no real conversation about it. That summer she was home was great. It was probably the first summer that we were friends versus sibling rival. We went out dancing one night together. I remember that. And she had lost some weight. She was dating someone. She had determined she was going to go for nursing and then later her NP. Like she was really excited about where life was headed. Went back to Orono in the fall, came home for October break, and I remember her driving out of the driveway to head back to Orono, and she had a four-door Saab, and she headed out waving, big smile, and that was the last time I saw my sister. However, later, maybe a week later, this is now October of 2001, and if we all remember, we're coming off of 2000, September 11th had just
Mhm.
happened
Mhm.
too, and I remember my parents woke me up what felt like the middle of the night, but I think it was probably maybe like 5 a.m., just really early morning. And they wrapped me in a blanket and they brought me into what was our makeshift living room because our house was in renovation at the time. And I thought, the high school has been bombed. Like, that must be what it is. Like, there's been, like, war. Like, that I knew, like, there was something I could tell major had happened, but that was the first thought that came to my mind, and my parents sat me down, and they said there had been an accident, and, or I don't know if they said there was an accident, but they said that my sister had passed and that she was gone. And I thought there must have been an accident, right? Like that's the only thing that could have happened. And then they said that no, she had taken her own life. And it was like, "W- what? Like, what? This can't be. What do you, like, there's no way that this could have happened, but sure enough, that it was the nightmare of truth, and that on October 12th of 2001, my sister took her own life on the University of Maine college campus.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So, so that's Kelly's story in a nutshell. That next day, so that October 12th was a Friday. Saturday, we were scheduled for our first round of playoffs for soccer. I was the captain of the soccer team, Westmont High School soccer team, and we were planning on going to Bangor. We were the let's see, number 7 playing number 2 seed of the first round of playoffs. And at the time, Gwen Bacon was the athletic director, and she showed up at my house that morning, and she said, "Holly, it's your call. I've talked to Bangor. They're willing to postpone the game. It's your call." And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like the game goes on. Like we have a game to play." And as I'm sure you are all too unfortunately familiar with, we were all just numb at that point in time, and there's nothing else you can do. So we went to Bangor and we played a soccer game. and we won.
Oh,
Oh,
goodness, thank God.
Have you ever heard this story? Have you heard the soccer story, how it ties into this?
No?
Yeah, so we were tied, I think 1-1, headed into later in the game. I was a sweeper. I was really good at kicking the ball and pushing people over, and so that's where they stuck me. Like, and we were getting down to the end of the game, and I looked up and I said, "Come on, Cal, like help us out." And within 15 seconds, the ball was in the back of the net, and we won the game.
wow.
And everyone was just like ridiculous. And somewhere up here, there is, because you guys can see me, I have it still to this day. This is the team photo from that day. I keep it in my office.
That's
And
so
so
Oh, wow.
awesome.
so that was pretty amazing. So that's where I kind of got on a little tangent there, walking down, reliving those days. But yeah, so I was a senior in high school, and the rest of that year was kind of a bit of a blur. But yeah, so kind of going back to telling, who Kelly was, but it was a time that I think that if she were to do the same things now, I think her connection with people, I think you would have had that, and hopefully would have filled that void of loneliness, of feeling different, that you can connect with another group of people more easily. And it was also a time where being a little bit different, I think, was harder. I don't think it was mainstream to be different, or you weren't celebrated for being different, and those demons got the best of
Well, she sounds amazing.
her. Oh, thank you.
I read about her as she's just a phenomenal human being.
And your own personal story of not necessarily being bigger than the moment, but being able to compose yourself and to have that own level of team and personal success with that soccer game is also really cool. That's a great story.
Thanks. Thank you.
Amidst terrible circumstances to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a time, when I tell that story, it was like, in through my eyes during this time, walking through some of it, and it we then made it to the next round of playoffs. And of course, like during this time, paralleling, you're doing all these planning logistical things when someone passes. And it's someone has to plan a funeral, right? And someone in you organizing in these dates and this and that. And so I believe that the funeral was on a Wednesday, and it was all set, and we were playing Waterville for the next round, and I was like, well, whatever, and the game was on the same day as the funeral, and I said, I can't make it, and they moved the game,
Okay,
to the
good.
next
Good.
day.
Yeah, I'd hope.
And so they moved the game, and I'll never forget seeing my entire soccer team sitting in like the front of the church all together. And that Waterville game, I played soccer with so many of the girls on the team through the years that, they were extremely supportive, and they've won, they beat us, but that was just like during that time, it was something that just carried. It was a distraction. It was an outlet for, all this energy that you have in you that you just don't know what to do with. And so it ended up being a really special time in my life that I will remember always. And so when you guys do like your Shine on Cast fundraisers, that's this, soccer oriented, that's why I'm always like, someday I'm going to join, because it just dovetails with my story so well. Um, but it is amazing too. I think that moving on, what feels like yesterday, that amazingly is 20 years now. And it's also just very strange that we have been without her for longer than we had her. That becomes a very strange threshold to cross. When I look at what I've accomplished in my, days, I always, someday I'll have a better office with all these, like all my trophies behind me. That fire stuck. And that outlet continues to be, for me, something that through my days, the early days, literally the next day of how I was going to continue on moving forward. And 20 years later, I can probably count on maybe my fingers and toes at this point in time, but the amount of days that I've missed moving my body and honoring that and outletting that energy into a healthy capacity, and I'm just thankful that I found that versus some other sort of outlet for this
Mm.
grief.
So, not to pivot too much, but obviously, you had mentioned the circumstances surrounding your sister's passing, and when it comes to anybody taking their own life, I think the conversation around it can be so different for so many different people. And I think first, I just want to ask, how do you feel, or how do you look at the circumstances of her passing?
It's different. It is I wonder sometimes I look at what you have all done with Cassidy and her memory, and I look at what has we just watched a movie recently where it was a football player who, passed in a car accident and they have all these foundations set up. And I wonder at times, is it just our personal family that we just kind of are more keeping things private, like that's our own personal grief and we will process through it in our own way, or underlying it, is it because we lost her by suicide versus it was her, I say choice and I use that very very quotationally in asterisk, and we'll come back to that side note, but versus accident that was beyond anyone's control. And but I also do believe that mental illness is an illness and that people are sick, and that in those moments of deep despair, there is no clear thinking whatsoever, and that they truly are battling an illness. And my sister was battling an illness. I have no problem. I am not ashamed at all to say how I lost my sister. It also poses a lot of questions as you process through grief, because it was her, again, quote, choice, her own personal actions. That wasn't just a wrong place at the wrong time on the wrong day. There's a lot of unanswered questions that come with it that she had the answers to that we'll just never find out. And that took some time to process through. There was a long time that I felt very victimized as a survivor. And, that's what we're all dubbed, right? Survivors, suicide survivors.
Right.
And that, again, I was 17. And so, kind of in the throes of a life change there, I actually ended up going to the University of Maine for school.
Oh, wow.
I was a black bear through and through. Go Maine hockey. I didn't miss a game like all through college. I wasn't even going to apply to another school as a civil engineering major, especially. But then I really had to think with, did I want to spend 4 years like at the location to which, my sister took her life? I just never went to that side of campus. And it wasn't until probably about 10 years after I had lost her, I went to an out of the darkness walk. That is one thing. There is a community around suicide, in that there are other people who have either it's a conversation, someone who's battling illness themselves, or survivors that can come together and you can feel that you're not alone. But I never will forget being at this out of the darkness walk, and everyone wore different color beads. And if you lost a child, you wore red beads. And if you lost a friend, you wore yellow. And if you lost a family member, whatever. But if you lost a sibling, you had on purple beads, let's just say. And there weren't a lot of people that had purple beads on. And it just kind of fueled my, well, this is my special story. Poor me, poor me. And then I just remember looking over and I just saw this other kid that he had his purple beads on. And we just looked at each other and we just kind of gave each other a little, chin nod. And that was kind of a little pivotal moment for me, that I wasn't the only one out there that had been through this. And my healing process, that was pretty memorable.
And when you went to this meetup, it was in college, right? So it was some time had passed between your sister's passing and
Yeah.
when you kind of went into this group. So I guess, how did you navigate the in between time there? Because I know personally, through my own experiences, you kind of have to play this balancing role of your own mental health and how you deal with the grief as it comes while also trying to operate in a normal family dynamic, or as normal as it can be, trying to
Mhm.
maintain grades, trying to do all those things. How was your at the time, how are you interacting with your parents and people around you? Did you have this same view on it? Were you feeling a lot of guilt? Were you feeling confused? What was that time like before you had found access to these people with similar situations?
We could talk about things, but we also don't really talk about our feelings a ton. Just kind of like recalling, you know, a lot of this time. I'm not sure about your family, but my mom's a super crier. And so it was like if we said anything, it was like, "Oh god, mom's crying again. Oh, we made her cry again." And it would be like, "Here, mom, like here's dinner, set the place." Like I set the dinner table and it would just be like waterworks crying. Rightfully
Mhm.
so for obviously any parent. Any movies that had like a mother-daughter dynamic in it, there goes mom, crying again. And so I would say that there was a period of time where it was like, let's just try not to make mom cry. And just in a protection of like, right, tears must be sadness, and I don't want to bring any sadness to my mom, who's like the best person on the face of the planet. And my dad was a little different. He's the logistics. So he was the one like organizing things, and someone has to like pay the bills, and so that was dad. So he didn't process his grief until probably mom and I had gotten through the major throes of some of ours. But I found comfort in my family. Like I just wanted to be like they were home, they were safe, they understood. Also, kind of a reminder, my sister had been traveling for a year and she was gone and she was in Japan, in 2000. So for a year, it had already been the three of us. There was already three dinner plates that you set at the table. There
Mhm.
already was like just three of us when we did something that we didn't hear from her for long periods of time, like kind of already. So I wouldn't say we were conditioned completely, but we kind of were in some sense of being used to the three of us. While I was immediately after, while I was still in high school, was very hard. I was good for about a half a day in school, and that was it. They rearranged my schedule, so the last two periods of the day were study hall, so my day was done at 1. That was when I was introduced to lifting at the gym. And the athletic trainer at the time, she was going through her own grief and that her fiance, with no warning, broke off their engagement after she had even bought her wedding dress and the whole bit. So we became kind of friends, and that's when I again found this outlet of athletics and lifting. When I was in college, I was in a new place. I wasn't different. There wasn't anything missing. I definitely had my days at times, and that's what I would just call them is I'm having a day. I'm going to do what I need to do, and we'll get through this day, and tomorrow is another day that will be better. And some days it was breath by breath, next is a new breath, and we will just get through that one. And then they were breaths turned to moments, moments turned to hours, hours turned to days, and you just kind of slowly come through it. But it was probably, I would say, that was, and then through my 20s was, your 20s are hard. Colby, it just is just a warning for you that like your 20s are terrible. And so in addition to like trying to figure out like what you're going to do with the rest of your life, who you're going to spend it with and what your family is going to look like and where you're going to live, what you're going to do for a job, like let's throw in grieving a sibling like on top of it. It's
Right.
awesome.
That's a really good point, though, Holly.
Yeah,
Yeah, amidst every celebration is the recognition that there was an absence of one already.
Right.
So,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And again, I found my favorite family times are a random Friday night that the Yahtzee dice are rolling, the music is on, like we're enjoying ourselves. I I don't look forward to Mother's Day, Father's Day, birthdays, Christmas, like those events, holidays are really stressful. And again, Colby, why I say like I think of you and I feel like I know you is because I know what it's like to be the surviving sibling. And it's awful. And I'm sorry that you have to do this because now you have the weight of all that responsibility of if you're not there for Mother's Day, there's no one there for Mother's Day. If you're not there for, and I don't say Mother's Day, Monica, just to like for Mother's Day, but or Christmas,
Right.
that wherever life brings you, what if you aren't there? I wasn't really encouraged to spread my wings and fly.
Hmm.
But I'm a homebody as it is. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. But I remember talking to my parents or my dad more, but when I was buying a house and I was looking at a house in Fairfield, and he's like, "This is just a little far away, don't you think?" I was like,
Fairfield.
like, okay, we'll stick to like. So I bought a house 1.8 miles from my parents. And, that's probably and it's still and I don't anticipate that ever going away, of being the only child. That continues and is probably the hardest part of this journey hereafter.
Yeah, I remember I was reading this book, and the person who was narrating it was talking about when he sort of lost this connection to people that knew him as his younger self. Like all of a sudden, he truly was just sort of free floating in the world. Is sort of how he saw himself, like the extension of his family that no longer is there, and any connection like to his young self, only his family would know that. And so this was his way
Mhm.
of internalizing this loss, and that resonated with me to an extent where it's like, yeah, I think about that. I really am sort of carrying around this torch now, and should anything happen in the future, it really is kind of terrifying in that way. It's a little scary, but your friends become your
Absolutely.
family too, and you learn to
Yeah.
lean on your parents more, and just other people around you in general. So I have a
Yeah.
good support system now, but you're right. You think about it, it doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't, and it's funny too, talking about, like, there was only one person that was there to watch that movie over and over when you were a kid, that gets the inside joke,
Right.
and it doesn't matter how much you explain it to someone else, like, they'll never get it. And, there was only one person that remembers. And what I'm learning now that I'm 37 and I've gotten to be the age that like my parents were. So I have my stepdaughter is 9 and I am the same age that my parents were when I was a kid. Like the difference in age between me and
Hmm.
Ashlyn is the same as my parents and I. And so I'm also realizing, like, all of the parental tricks that they had, like, up their sleeves, that pizza and candy and a movie on Friday night was not a treat for us, it was a treat for them because we were, like, completely it's like, "Yep, that's how
Uh,
parenting works." And so I remember I was telling my parents, right, because that's all I have from my childhood is my parents, is I was like, "Oh my goodness, we went to see the Addams Family, like, new movie, and, like, some of the lines are the same," and my mom's like, "Yeah, think I've ever s I don't know if I've ever seen that." I was like, "I don't think I've ever seen that." Like, we rented it from Video Time, every chance we could, and then I was like, "You never you just put us in a room with a TV and a pizza and candy, and you wouldn't party with That's brilliant! That's amazing!" I get it now. And so it's like some of those things, like, still come up. But I also have more so in the last few years, I think, lean into some of my childhood friends that I spent a lot of time with. And I am really lucky that I do have a few friends that I spent a lot of time with when I was a little kid, neighbors, and they were then probably one, two, three people maybe that when I was in junior high, we spent every night at each other's houses on the weekend and kind of leaning into some of those friends a little bit more, realizing that they are the key to some of my childhood memories too. And I think that that's come with being older and just kind of experiences.
I wonder if we could go back just a little bit just to talk about the support that you received. You mentioned friends that you reunited with, but I'm really curious to know how friends supported you in the beginning, in those first weeks and months, and what your family dynamic was about. Because I think siblings can relate to your story and to Colby's.
In the first hours, days, it was my soccer team,
Mm-hmm.
my coach. To be able to kind of talk to someone that wasn't my parents was really needed, I guess. And I'll never forget too, like that Saturday getting on the bus to go to Bangor, and I was the last one to get on the bus. And obviously, the team knew the situation, and I walked on the bus, and everyone's eyes were red and puffy, and everyone was bawling. And it just, I think it was there, and it's funny. I've never really thought of it until now, putting the pieces together, but it really solidified my need for a team in my life.
Hmm.
And I wonder if that's where it all comes from. So that was definitely in the beginning where it was. As, time progressed, there were very few people. Then I went to college not long after. So those people didn't know me. They didn't know my story. They had no idea. I actually had someone say to me one time, yeah, I was supposed to have a rugby game at the University of Maine, but some jack wagon, for lack of a better term, I don't remember exactly what he said, decided to kill themselves on the rugby field. So we couldn't, what are the chances that this person had
Wow.
no idea what my story was and they were speaking to their sibling?
Must have broke your heart all over again.
It it's amazing the things that have, things that people say that just knock the wind out of you.
Mm.
But over the years, lots of counseling, lots of therapy, lots of personal development too. I'm extremely independent. I'm like stubbornly independent. Ask Nick. It's not like to a point, it's not a really great trait. And I'm extremely competitive. And I have found outlet again. I keep coming back to it, but it is just so my story of, I think, support doing, whether it was a race, it was a lifting contest.
And although on the surface they were there to watch me and support me like you would anyone that was doing a sporting event, right? I guess in my mind it was they're supporting my life, right? So when someone says, good job, you did great, congratulations, it just has so much more deeper meaning for me. And so I continue to challenge myself and I continue to push myself. And maybe it's continuing to get that like atta girl, which is like, I see you. When life kind of continued a little bit more, 2012, I stumbled into this little workout called Insanity. And I was like, this is really hard. It's awesome. I'm going to do it. This is my outlet. I can be pain. Like, here is an outlet for my pain, right? Let me lift this really heavy weight and be in pain. And then I can,
Right? I can release it. So fitness for me has become this outlet of my pain. And so with that though, I found the new team, and it has again become just this support system that you have these people that are giving you the atta girls and I see you working hard. I acknowledge you for everything in your life that has gotten you to this place. And that, I think, again, just I've surrounded myself with amazingly supportive communities that might not be like suicide specific or grief specific, but they support me in life and all endeavors.
So you have all these outlets that you found to help you through your healing. And it sounds like you weren't able to do a ton of that at home with your parents just because of the place that they were in with their own grief. And was that difficult for you? Did that hinder your relationship, or were you able to identify that at a young age that, hey, my parents are going through this and I'm going through this and we're in separate places? Or what was that like?
It was just, it's funny. My parents are amazing. I love my parents dearly. And so anything they say, I don't ever want it to come across that like they're unsupportive in any way. But we did grow up in a household of, we didn't talk freely about hard things. And I think that that has actually been a major battle and struggle, particularly like for my dad through his grief process, because he comes in as a very tough, competitive, don't be a wimp, suck it up. That was how he was raised,
Right.
and that was kind of how we were raised, and I'm thankful for that. I have great grit and focus and drive because of it. But when it comes to some of the tough stuff, it's a little harder to start those conversations. We went to counseling together as a family for a little while, like in the very early days. And I
Mhm.
think that that was helpful. So some of the conversations were forced via therapists. And so we were able to get some of that stuff out in a safe space. I don't remember going for very long though. And then
Yeah.
after that, it just kind of became like remembering like the good stuff. I would say more of our conversation is like, "Oh, Kelly would have really liked this.
Mhm.
Oh, this really reminds me of." I think the first Christmas without her, we were all tasked to find a Christmas ornament that reminded us of our favorite story of her. I found this sheep, which is like a long, like super tandem story, but her and I were chased down by sheep on an island in Maine one time. And so like our Christmas tree has these like random sheep ornaments on it that are just like a reminder of that. And so we definitely look for the positive. We look for the good remembrance. But I would say that amongst our family too, at times, like particularly my grandparents, like we don't talk about suicide. We don't talk about like, we don't talk about Kelly a ton. Not that it's a, like, oh, forgetful, but I think that it's just a really hard conversation and we don't have super hard conversations a lot. Now, 20 years removed, we always gather on her birthday. We always gather on October 12th. And actually, coincidentally, my parents' chocolate lab that they got in, I don't know, sometime, his birthday is October 12th. And so one of those little godwinks that now we don't say like, oh, we're gathering for Kelly's death anniversary. We say we're having a birthday party for Buffett. And in our family, we know what that is,
It's code.
and the
Yeah.
significance of it. And I guess that's kind of like that describes perfectly how our family kind of we talk in code
Mhm.
like a little bit.
Yeah.
You won't see us with like the angel wing tattoo, or not tattoos, but like stickers like on the back of our
Mhm.
car. Nothing wrong with that. That's just not the style of our family. But we have dragonfly tattoos because the little kids book Water Bugs and Dragonflies. I
Mhm.
don't know if you're familiar with that one. So dragonflies are our thing. And so we have dragonflies all over the place. But if you don't know, you don't know. But if you're in the know, you know. But there's never been any sort of it didn't tear us apart. Not that I saw, I think it brought us closer together as a family. And even now, if I have a few nights to myself, I won't go call a friend to go hang out. I'll just go to my parents' house
Mhm.
and hang
Yeah.
out. We're that close just to be with my people.
I was thinking like it's been 20 years, which is for us feels like forever, right? And, if you could look back now on your younger self, all you've learned about grief, what would you say to your younger self now about what's lying ahead for you?
To answer your question directly, I would say it'll be okay. Again, through my grief process, there was a period of time where, like I said, it was very poor me. I feel bad for me. I felt bad for myself. I think it was also just the years that I was in from 17 to 22. I think every 17 to 20-year-old, sorry, Colby, is like super self-absorbed with what their problem is. And
Of
their
course.
problem is the biggest problem, that there is out there. And then I guess that I started to have success in life in different things. It's so funny. I never didn't sit just like when I came into this, I didn't think I would be talking about fitness and movement so much, but it just always comes back to it that I started to have success in things. And a lot of it was like physically, like physical fitness related. And, I went to the gym all the time. That was what I learned to do in those early days that I needed something. I was either going to sit on the couch and feel sorry for myself and who knows what destructive behavior I was going to do, or I was introduced to the gym and I would go work out and then I would go to lacrosse practice. Like who knows what I would have filled those hours with, whether it be smoking cigarettes in the parking lot, like, who knows what it would have been, but I went to the gym instead. So I guess like coming way back to it, I would say that I am the person I am today because of all the things that have happened to me in my life. And because I can't bring her back, no matter what I do, there's nothing I can do that can bring her back. So find what you can use that fuel for good. And you guys are a phenomenal example of that. All of the things that you do, that you have chosen to use the energy that you're given. The engineer in me is like, heat is energy, so we need to expel the energy somehow. Like, you could be in a downward spiral, or you guys spiral up instead. You're going to go up or down, so you got to pick a direction. And we have picked up, and I'm thankful for that. And I don't think that I would have that if it wasn't for this horrific event that has happened to me. So to my younger self, I would say, like, I hate to say, like, this will pay off, but I would say there is good to come. And I even hate to say there's good to come of this, because there is no good, but there is in some ways that, again, this trajectory will work out okay, I guess.
Well, I think how you've chosen to live your life after your sibling has passed is very inspiring.
Thank you.
You do have a choice. You do have a choice.
You do. And I think you also, when you go through something so terrible, you also realize that, like, a flat tire is nothing. Or when you break a window, or if something doesn't go right, that's nothing. Like, it doesn't faze me. We'll just carry on. Or that everyone has a story, and that person that you cross paths with, that maybe they're on the brink of making a terrible decision in their life. But if you can be nice to them, or you don't know what they're going through, or maybe the coworker that you work with, maybe they've lost a child and you just don't know that, or a sibling, or that everyone has a story, and to be kind. And it's amazing the people that don't have that experience in their life, to give any sort of compassion for, and empathy through their day. Yeah, like, when we were setting this up and, like, things weren't working, I was like, okay, I'll see her. Like, there's like, why get worked up over it? Like, again, like, in this, like, realm of the things that have happened in our lives, like, the audio not working on a podcast is, like, super small potatoes. Like, that's
You're
cool.
gonna have to teach
Not
me
a
how
big
to
deal.
do that then.
That comes with age, I think, Colby.
Yeah, I think Colby, I'm curious. I want to ask you, as a, I remember going through my days and being, like, angry, like, no one else gets it. My parents still have a child. My aunts and uncles still have a niece and nephew. My grandparents still have, like, a grandchild. No one else experienced the same loss that I did. And I'm curious how you are processing that, and working through that in your grief.
Well, now it's certainly interesting because I'm in college, so I'm separated from a lot of the support groups that were just kind of handed to me back when I was home and in high school. And everything that I have here for those groups and those spaces, I've sort of had to construct myself or insert myself into. So it's interesting. A lot of my processing is still with with my family, and I get to do some pretty great stuff with the foundation still. And obviously, this podcast has been a great space for me to hear other people's stories and find a way to new perspectives to look on my own experiences and reflect on them. And more so right now, that's, I guess, where I am, is just trying to learn how to observe my own situation from a different perspective and move with that, and hopefully bring some positivity with it. In a bit of a strange standstill now. I wish I had a better answer. I mean, certainly when it was more fresh and I was back in high school, I could speak to that more because that was just so chaotic, and there was a lot of starts and stops. Like, oh, we'll try out therapy, or we'll try this thing, see if this works, and if I feel better about things, or I'll try this new group of kids at school or something, and there were all these different things that I was doing to cope with the loss, or to at least distract myself. Yeah, it's interesting. And the further removed I get from it, the less raw emotion I feel, and the more contemplation I have towards the things like we talked about earlier, which was, what does this look like in 25 years, or like even just 5 or 10 minutes. It can feel sort of isolating being the only sibling, the only child, and similarly to you, the only person at my age range in my friend group that has lost a sibling. I think I'm the only one. So yeah.
It's it sucks. Like, I mean, really, I think sometimes we just need to say that, and I, of course, just want to extend. It's so funny. Like, I feel like I'm 17 too, so like I'm still there. So I'm like, Colby, like it's cool. Like, if you want to like hang out sometime, like yeah, 37.
But don't you feel like there are fewer resources though for like siblings? Because there's so much focus on when there's child loss, it immediately goes to parents. Or if it's even if you're an older sibling, it goes towards the person's spouse or its immediate family. And I do feel like there are less resources and less information out there for siblings.
I think that over the years, if someone were to have thrown me in like a sibling support group, like I don't know if I would have liked that. I don't know if that would have been like my thing. I'm thankful that I was allowed to, had I said I want to find like a sibling support group, I'm sure that my parents would have done everything to find me that. It just wasn't what spoke to me. And I guess I would, the little wisdom that I can give is just like whatever fills your cup, like fill your cup with it. And if it's foundation stuff and, grief things that you guys have all been doing great. But I also hope for you that you have things that fill your cup that are yours, like they're Colby's. And it's like what you like to do. And if it's while you're at school, like do the woodsman team, rock climbing, like, take advantage of all that stuff out there and you'll never know what you might stumble into that is just exactly what you were looking for. That doesn't have to be like grief support, box. Like you may find it in some other sort of endeavor.
Yeah, it can happen naturally. I mean, sometimes some of the most profound moments of healing have been, on the peaks of mountains, or they've been just, having a comfortable conversation with a friend, So, yeah, absolutely.
Well, Holly, this has been such a great conversation to have. And we like to give you the opportunity at the end of our conversations like this to kind of have an emotional vision of Kelly. Like, what do you want people to remember about her? Because at the end, we want to remember her in this podcast.
She was such a giver, and she was so creative, and she was so responsible. And again, like more responsible than I feel like I'll ever be in my entire life. And she saw beauty in everything. And that when she was 17, 18 years old, she was going against the flow and she was being her true self when that wasn't, again, the cool thing to do. And so I guess if I were to sum it up of what I would want people to remember about her is that like to be you unapologetically and proud, and also know that you are loved. You are so loved. And even if it doesn't feel like you are loved, you are so loved, and the world would be a duller place without you. So if you think that the world would be a better place without you, like I promise that it won't be, and that whoever you are out there, you do give light to someone and they deserve that light.
That's awesome. She'd be really proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thanks for sharing your experience with us today. And I'm hoping that another sibling out there that's struggling with this has connected with you in a way that only you can connect with other people. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And it was such a blast to talk to you guys. And like you said, Colby, I've thought of you so much through the years that I'm glad that we had a chance to connect too. And if at any point in time there's, I don't know what it could be, but your mom has my phone number now, pass it on or shoot me a message. I'm on the Instagrams and the Facebooks, so you can find me there and shoot me a message.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And maybe next time we can have you back on the pod again. We can do it a post-workout or something. We'll get Mom and I to go lift some boulders with you, and then we can hop on the mic.
That's good.
And with that, we'll
Sounds
close the
awesome.
podcast.
As long as you love.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this podcast helpful, please share our link with others and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. I'm Monica Charette, reminding you that you are never alone in your grief. Until next time, we'll be right here with you, holding the light.
As long as you love. As long as you love.